we will get into the topic here. Of course, it is about skilling, as the title says here, the blended learning as a training for cost effective skilling as such. So, first we will look at what is the present scenario, why the skilling is required. Of course, we have, of course, when we were doing graduations, we were not exposed to much of practical things. We had to learn the hard way, we have to come to the industry, learn and put our efforts later on like that. But these days everything is available either through hardwares or something like that, which can be used in the classroom, as well as the present day where you have this sort of skilling tools in the form of software as such. So, basically if you look at why this skilling is necessary, it is necessary for the learner to participate in the benefits of growth and contribute to the growth as such. This could be one big reason where if we are not into skilling or we do not skill our skills, naturally we will be left alone and not be part of the growth as such, where the present day things are moving along. So, that is one big necessity. The other need is like there is a changing realities. Today everything is going at a very fast pace. So, there is globalization, there is competitiveness, and there is this knowledge economy which is going to forging ahead in that direction as such. So, if India were to get into that sort of knowledge sort of economy, so it is necessary that we skill ourselves in a way that we could develop workers who are knowledgeable as well as who are technologists who can face the changing demands in the industry as such. That means who can be the driving force for innovation and growth. So, this has become an important expectation in the industry as such. And further, if you look at what is happening is where this wage structure is moving, how people are getting employed. If you look at that, of course, these are obvious things, but still we need to emphasize on those things like that. So, where it is moving is like where there is skill and where there is some training that is happening, in those areas only people are getting employed as such. So, that is where we need to skill ourselves so that we can be part of the growth and benefit through that growth as such. So, in the words of Jack Welch, he says what is competitive edge, that is, to quote, I believe that the desire and the ability of an organization to continuously learn from any source anywhere and to rapidly convert this learning into action is the ultimate competitive edge. So, in today's world, if we are not competitive, or for that matter the industry is not competitive, they are nowhere, they are outbeaten and they are lost as such. So, in order to be there in that competitive race, so one has to be continuously learning and have to be able to acquire those skills and put them into action as such. So, that is where the need for skilling is necessary as such. So, first of all, of course, again in the organization point of view, why do we train as such? So, we train to prepare our workforce to be effective in the markets, agile and response to economic changes. This is the main criteria. So, that is in turn the organizational readiness as such. So, if people are able to put themselves or they are agile enough to accommodate to various changes, then that is their organizational readiness, which is nothing but by two factors. One is through motivation and the other is through knowledge. Okay. Motivation again has to come within, or it has to be driven as such. Otherwise, the other part is the knowledge part, which has to be acquired through training, so through skilling. So, all these things have to be included. So, in order to be an organization which is ready to meet the challenges as such. So, if you look at how these training scenarios are changing, or where the demands for training is the training has become a need which is incremental, it is never stagnating like that. The technologies are so fast upgrading itself as such. So, naturally if people are with old technologies, naturally they are unable to cope up with the situation. So, naturally one has to increment his knowledge as such continuously. So, skilling has to be a lifelong process. It cannot stop at any point as such. So, that is where the other the requirement of training is like. Secondly, of course, as I told you earlier, it is very fast and furious. The technology changes are not just lasting for even 6 months or something like that. So, you have to continuously evolve to or to get yourself trained in order to meet to these requirements as such. Of course, there is again multi-skilling as another requirement which has become a necessity. Multi-skilling for the reason that in today's world you see there the integrated technology there. It is not the technology of mechanical engineers or electrical engineers or maybe the IT engineers. It is a combination. It is a holistic thing. You saw those guitars and all those things which are a complex situation where people have to assimilate many technologies and put forth their efforts in devising those things like that. So, in order to do all those things you need multi skills. There were days when I came out, I was in mechanical doing some production work, then got into training again doing some mechanical things. Then if you look at in today's world, as far as in the present company where I am, I have to learn electrics, I have to learn PLC, all those things like that in order to be in line with whatever is the expectation as such. So, that is the thing like. So, you cannot stop yourself at being just a single technology oriented person. You have to be a multifaceted, multi-technologist in order to develop yourself or in order to put forth your efforts into your organization as such. And of course, there is not much of time, there is not much of resources at the disposal, especially in the training side. So, naturally blended learning has become another thing like, because it is a cost effective tool which can maybe suffice all the present days requirements as such. So, how we can incorporate this sort of blended learning as such? So, there are many things that are available in today's thing, like you have the LMS, the learning management system, then there is a learning content system, there is integration of technologies, there is blended learning, there are assessment tools, and there are devices and maybe bandwidths and other things which can help in this sort of e-learning things like. So, there are so many facets of tools, array of tools that are available in order to do this or accomplish this training requirements as such. Now, looking at what is this blended learning, of course, what is the benefits of blended learning, you see that you have a reduced learning time. Why reduced learning time? Because the more number of senses you involve in your training process, the better the learning is as such. So, if you just put your hands and do something like that, okay, somewhat okay. If you also have something to hear, you have something to see and all those things, that makes your training complete. So, the training effort has to be incorporated with maximum number of senses that are available with you in the process of learning, by which the training can be more effective and more retainable as such. So, in order to do this, of course, this e-learning is one of the processes as such. So, thereby what happens is, of course, you have visuals, you have audios, and along with that you have yourself working on it. So, your learning time becomes much reduced as such. Of course, for the same reason you also have a better retention also. So, you could retain those things because you are employing maximum number of senses into those efforts as such. Of course, you can ease to use this because of variable learning speed, because these are not maybe a classroom, a 60-minute sort of session or something like that, where everything is dumped into you and you have to go through all those things like that. You could do it at your pace, at whatever learning speeds, at whichever time you wanted it, and in how many times you would like to learn them as such. So, by which what happens is, it is very useful at a varied pace as such. Of course, again, because it is at your disposal, you can use it 24/7. That is again another advantage of using this learned learning or blended learning and e-learning as the cost effective tools as such. Of course, the quality is not going to change. Today, if you look at a classroom session, it is dependent on the delivery who is going to deliver and what time he is going to deliver and all those things like so. So, these factors can affect your training, but in this case e-learning always the content is going to be the same. So, naturally what is going to happen is you would also have this constant quality, there is not going to be any variations in the period in which it is being applied as such. So, therefore, you have that sort of facilities also. Of course, it is cost effective for the reason that it is virtual, you do not put money into those hardwares by which you will have lot of expenses incurred, but at the same time you could reach to whatever the desired objectives are. Of course, one
blended learning you said is a combination of hardware and software.
hardware and software.
But e-learning you are saying to do blended learning.
E-learning is again of course, it is just a virtual sort of arrangement. There are two aspects, one is the e-learning, the other one is the blended learning. Blended learning is involving the hardware also as such, which I will be showing few slides on them, whereas the e-learning is like 24/7 effort as such, which has been devised in a manner that it can be it can deliver the desired objectives as such. So, there are two aspects of that. So, blended is one stage advanced, where you could have certain things which can be simulated or made to run with the help of the software as such. It is software, hardware both combined together as such. Of course, again looking at this e-learning, it is matching the technology infrastructure. Maybe we have big servers or whatever is big bandwidths available at our places, which is going waste or which can be used for such purposes. So, you could also put them to this training of tasks as such, by which you could make this as not an additional investment, but using the existing facility to deliver this knowledge over the entire campus or to reach to many more users as such. So, it is not going to involve lot of cost in developing this training environments. Basically, if you look at the hardware, maybe lot of R&D has gone into that. So, if you see the solenoid valve which was triggering the guitar or something like that, you could see that with such a miniature arrangement like that, which needs to be developed in order to switch that way in that frequency, so that you could get something which can be pleasant to hear as such. So, in doing all those things, there is lot of development that is happening as such. So, whereas in the e-learning sort of situation, you are not going to incur that much of cost. So, that is again an advantage in using this technology as such. So, of course, you have a comprehensive administration through this LMS and performance support capability as other options like that.
Blended training is, it means, not cost effective in comparison to e-learning, because hardware part will be required in blended one. Isn't it?
Yeah, you mean to say on the cost aspect as such. Yeah. See, what is happening is, of course, you need to have those hardwares, as well as with the help of the software you are going to drive it as such. So, it is in place where, of course, it is basically e-learning, but it is in place where you are already having a what is that, a hardware. Let us say you want to train a group of 50 people like that. So, it is not going to happen with that 50 people like. So, how you are going to do this? So, basically you are going to use them virtually on those situations like that, and whenever on time sharing basis you can link up to get a feel of what is happening really. See, everything that is happening virtual cannot be maybe conceived in with confidence for that matter. See, you are doing something, you are not sure, okay, finally after doing that whether it is really going to work when I am going to handle those equipments in the real time as such. So, in these situations you want to prove yourself as such, in which case you could also associate, you can dump all those things into your hardware through this blended learning arrangement, a tool which can link this whatever your work and with the realities what is going to finally be delivered as such, and make yourself confident about what you are doing as such. So, that way it becomes a cost effective arrangement like that. Let us say if you were to invest say 15-20 of these kits into your place as such, really is going to be very, very costly. In those aspects, this is going to be a cost effective solution as such. Okay. So, the role of e-learning can be on two facets. One is to support performance and other is to augment the blended learning process as such. So, by performance support, what happens is it is going to be just in time sort of thing, like there is no measurements there, no administration, and the learning objects are there. Whereas in the case of blended learning, it is basically an assessed and mentored sort of thing, like aligned to organizational readiness and objectives, planned, of course, integrated with information learning technology, tracking is possible, curriculum based, and performance metrics are also available on those things. So, how we are going to deliver this e-learning, of course, we all know that, but still. So, you have the course content which is being hosted into a server, and from there, from the local arrangements through a file server, you are going to load it into the PC or through CDs or whatever is the thing. So, we will look at what is new about e-learning as such. So, way back in 90s, you had the computer based training, the CBTs we call it as such, where certain things were available on the computer by which you can go through them and graduate yourself into those technologies as such. Then later on, we had the web based thing, like when the web was in full swing, where you could have this material available through the web and use it so that you could get your training needs fulfilled. Then there was the classroom managers, which is basically a sort of a LMS arrangement which can be used for learning purposes as such. Then it became a knowledge portal over the web by which you could access them and according to your requirement get those contents delivered at your place as such. Of course, there was also the e-campus, which is again spread over the entire area. Such say if you have a plant about thousands of workers over there, so throughout the plant you wanted this thing to be available, this sort of technologies for your requirements, then you have the e-campus also. Of course, tech to screen is again another thing which is the real blended learning as such, which is a recent development where you have the iPad which gets connected to all these hardware peripherals by which you could do the training, which is both software as well as hardware. The content is there on the iPad. Then you have connectivity links developed which can relate to the hardware by which you can make them work as such. Again,
Tech to this 2014 was
tech to screen. Yeah.
You can actually operate the hardware remotely.
Yes, because there are specialized peripherals or the connectivity which has been developed, which is just clamped to the iPad and they take it to the real world as such. That is how it happens. So, again using this e-learning, there are plenty of options. Even in Delhi, there was in one of the exhibitions, it was displayed, this tech to screen some time back. So, you could have this e-learning possibilities through a standalone version where you have a license onto your computer by which you could access those materials. This is one of the possibilities. Then you could have a network arrangement where through a LAN arrangement you could share it with a group of systems by which multiple users can use those arrangements as such. Again, this is another possibility or which is commonly prevalent. Then, so you could also have contents which are available on a existing learning management systems as such. There are a lot of LMS available, so which can be compatible with those things where they are being used over there. Then of course, you also have the classroom management sort of thing, like where you have a group of users to whom you have to administer those things. Each one is having certain capabilities and requirements, and according to this you can customize your requirement to your classroom situations and can deliver those things. Like, and of course SaaS, that is software as a service, online demand, you can get the softwares for your working as such. Of course, there is also content which are open to some open source platforms. So, these are the options to acquire the e-learning requirements that are available today as such. So, what is the benefit in this e-learning thing like? Of course, you could have a standalone version, or you could have a network version, or contents for already existing platforms, as we saw a little earlier in those slides, and also as a classroom manager plus content, then complete solutions, and as a individual ASP solution over the web as such. So, we now look into what is the benefits of the blended learning as such. So, if you look at what is this blended learning and what is the advantages in it. So, first of all, we said it is a cost effective advantage. The cost effectiveness is what is to be looked into in today's training situations. Cost matters the most. So, naturally we need to look at the cost effective option as such. So, software offers variety of affordable learnings as such. So, you could get many technologies on the software. So, that is one big possibility of having this blended learning as such, and in addition to this can be used to enhance the functionality of trainers and trainees as such. So, in having this blended learning, the training on software can follow initially from the training on the hardware as such. So, that means you have some basic training done on the hardware. So, you could not extend the training to much deeper levels as such. So, in which situations the software could help you in trying to acquire those knowledges as such. So, for performing more sophisticated experiments, you would use those blended learning tools as such. Of course, using this blended learning, you have the unlimited experiment possibilities. So, this is again the feature there. So, you could experiment to whatever extent you would like to. It does not limit you based on what is the hardware available or what is the other connectivities that are possible as such. So, naturally you could extend to whatever possibilities you would like to. And of course, it can cater to a larger number of audiences, because you could project them, and naturally you could address to a very big clientele. So, blended learning here is one such thing, like where PLC with process simulation software as such. So, you have something virtual here. So, this is a virtual arrangement. You have some hardware connectivity there, then you have the PLC. So, what you could do is you could address this thing like, so you could not make such a thing in your place which could be really existing in the industry, or which could be the requirement in the industry as such. So, here is an arrangement where there is this wine bottles to be filled to a particular level, and it has to be capped or whatever is the thing like. So, this process, of course, we could do a program for it, looking into all those constraints that have been described over there, but still you are not sure what is going to happen, whether it is really going to work as such. In those situations, you are putting a doubt into whatever your learnings as such, or whatever you are demonstrating over there. In those situations, you have this blended learning arrangement where the software comes into aid, where you have the physical realities in front of your screen, to which it can also react to whatever is your inputs that are given through the PLC, by which you could maybe confidently say, no, I have programmed such a thing, or I have worked on such a thing like that. So, that is where the effectiveness of the blended learning comes into as such. So, to explain this, the PLC controls a virtual process here. So, you could perform a wide variety of experiments there, and you could deliver this. So, I will just open this. It is also available on the net. So, you have a water tank here, to just give you an example here. So, you have those levels which is telling about the minimum and the maximum level as such. You have the heater over there and you have those valves to open and close as such. So, how do you meet to this requirement? This could be a requirement in the process industry. You have some chemicals in the thing like which has to be kept at a particular temperature and which has to be kept at this level and it has to be opened at this sequence and all those requirements as such, which could be a physical reality. So, in order to meet those requirements, having a PLC knowledge or programming knowledge is one part like, but really putting them into your on the job situation could be little shaky at the beginning as such. So, you have an experimental situation where in the classroom you could develop a program for it by which you could really control the process and have the confidence in yourself saying that okay, I could manage this and I am capable of doing that. So, that is that understanding or that knowledge that I can do it is what is skilling as such, which for which this skilling blended learning comes in a long way as such. So, this is one such process. Similarly, maybe I can say, let us say you have a 3-cylinder situation like this. So, you could use those hardware and try to do them and acquire those things, but here is an arrangement where virtually you could try to do this thing like that. Okay. So, there are plenty of these things that are available like that. So, ball sortings or some parking lot where you are going to manage the parking lot based on availability of spaces and all those things like that. So, all these things is now driven by an internal program that has already been developed, but of course, you could also, if you connect it to the hardware, you could emulate it by writing your own program. There is a possibility for emulation when you connect it to the easy port, one of the devices which can make this hardware software get linked. You could do this thing yourself as such, something like this. Similarly, some garage door or something like that. Okay, so that is just a small glimpse of this. So, how we were just talking about how this can be managed and how this can bring in the confidence of having learnt or skilled oneself as such, and how this blended learning tool can aid in those processes as such. So, we will look at how it can be controlled. It need not be this particular software, it can be any software for that matter like that. So, you have this thing running on the PC which you wanted to control. So, naturally you have this as the hardware, or you could also have maybe some other input devices by which you can send a trigger into this thing, so that it can make this software to move the way it should be. So, all you see here is the connections. So, this is the central junction bridge between this hardware and the software there. So, you have the power supply, you have the cable that is being connected into it and which is connecting into the computer as such, by which you can run this virtual process with the help of this hardware with this arrangement as such. Again, you have a PLC, not for that matter any specific PLC, you could use any PLC for that matter, where you have that again something on the software there, you have the connection, then you have some other interfaces by which you can connect it to those devices there, and which can address this signal into this and finally reach into this place as such. So, again you have now a physical arrangement, maybe there are those relays there, you have those signals coming out of those relays, and if you want to address to your system on the computer, so you could do it by just linking into this box all those physical signals and addressing it into the computer through this device as such. So, here again we have the possibility of a relay managed arrangement where the software is made to work with the help of the thing like. And of course, we saw a physical hardware which can control the software. We also looked into the other arrangement where a relay logic which can again manage the arrangement. And here we have another thing, that is the PLC. Now, even if you would like to connect your PLC signals into the software, you could do so by just connecting it the same way as we did. We are only replacing the thing like. So, now you see here how many technologies are getting involved there, and the scope for learning on one platform is getting enlarged as such. So, you get multi-skilling, you have some IT exposures getting involved here, you have some mechanical elements, you have some relay, you have some PLC logics, all for making something virtually moving on the screen as such. So, that is where this blended learning becomes a very effective tool for learning as such. Of course, again such complex arrangements like the mechanical arrangements where there are lot of actuators, sensors, robots and all those things which need to be controlled. Again, this is not a problem. Still it is possible to work with those arrangements also with the blended learning arrangement as such. So, what is the reason or what is the possibilities of having this blended learning as such? So, first of all, you have the flexibility. As we saw a little earlier, we were using hardwares, we were using relay based controls, we used PLCs in order to do that. So, such a big variety of arrangements can be incorporated into our learning situations as such. So, that is a big advantage in using a blended learning tool as such. Okay. Of course, safety is another big factor. So, you always fear what will happen, whether that fuse will go or that CPU will burn or something like that. So, this fear is always there when you are first hand working on those things. But look at the virtual arrangement, you do not have any such fears, there is nothing that is going to be damaged over there. So, all can happen is that your program or whatever your thing cannot physically work over there. So, this safety is again, equipment safety is one big advantage in using a virtual arrangement as a blended learning as such. Of course, it can be adapted to varied situations. You can use it for maybe PLC training, you can use it for logic training or maybe some other hardware training for that matter, or you can also extend it to varied other technologies, something like robotics, or you could use about DC motors or something like that. So, you have the scope to expand to whatever the limits are as such. Of course, again it is portable, it is not very bulky and all those things, like you can take it to wherever you want, and of course, available whenever you require as such. So, here is an arrangement where you could see a 3D simulation of a factory and a process. So, this simulation is actually a blended learning arrangement where you could physically move all these things if you were to program it as such. So, you have a physical situation which can be controlled virtually through your arrangements which are going to be hardware as such. So, again coming back to the uses of blended learning, you have usually the robotics are becoming the need of today's thing, or at least the craze for learning all those things are in a big way. So, in order to learn these things, it is difficult for us to bring in all these robots and all those things like that into our classrooms and learn them. First of all, they are very expensive. Secondly, there is always the technology, or it is not very familiar to us. So, it always creates a fear in ourselves that we may spoil something like that. So, in those situations, the virtual learning or learning through this sort of blended arrangements is going to be very handy as such. So, you could do robot offline programming with this sort of virtual arrangements as such. So, you could look into the kinematic simulations of these robots with very high accuracies. So, you could teach them on the software or with some teaching pendant from outside as such. In some cases, you also have the controllers available there where you can straight away download this your program whatever is developed virtually into those areas as such. and of course there is also collision detection and all those things like. And it doesn't limit there, it spreads to a wide array of things like that. Means in your classroom situations you are not, or in your hardware situation where training is involved, you will be looking at only one equipment. So you have an array of sources by which you can work upon and make use of this training as such. So that means you have so many possibilities, like you have ABB, Kamau or Adapt, Kuka, Denso, so Kawasaki, something like that. So you have all the, or you have the scope to use such varied sorts of robots into your applications as such. It is available in the new version, it is available. So you have such huge varieties of platforms that are there which you can use them as such. So you would now feel the advantage of using the blended learning, how really it is going to be cost effective as such. You will be dumping your maybe labs or whatever is the thing, if you were to have those physical arrangements and maintaining them over a period of time and all those things is really going to be very, very costly affair, and which will deter you from making use of those sorts of arrangements in the training situations. But here this arrangements or this virtual learning platform can help you to bring such arrangements at the fingertips and at a very cost effective manner as such. So not only that, maybe there is one common compiler which you are going to use and trying to use different things which is going to send signals and make it to actuate as such, but you could also do programming on a native language also with this. So that facilities also have come into this sort of controllers as such. So you could have some Mitsubishi Alpha Basic 4 or 5 or 345 which is MRL, then KUKA, then ABB Rapid, then you have Adapt Stabi robots which are V+, then industrial robo languages as the options that can be used as such. So you look at so many things like, and apart from that you could also have those compilers also getting integrated into those arrangements if you really wish to have them. So of course very specifically you could do the Mitsubishi robo controlling, and you can download, upload from the robo, which comes as default in this case of software as such, whereas the other compilers like KUKA or ABB, Fanuc and all those things has to be procured additionally as such. So you have these robots virtually, as I was telling you. So I will just go into how it is happening as such. So you have a student workplace, either in these versions as such, you bring in whatever the software that is or whatever robo which we were talking about into those libraries there, and you prepare a position list and you do the programming and you start to simulate. So you have the robo working in the same manner as such as we desired as such. Or else you could create your own work situations, like in the studio sort of arrangement. In this particular case, you could devise this robo according to your requirement in terms of sizing and all those things and make it to work as such. And of course you can also use it along with the mechanical elements in the case of a MPS sort of arrangement as such. So again, coming into the advantages of the blended learning, here in the virtual means as well as on the hardware you could do it, but hardware will come little later. But in the virtual means, that means you need not have this DC drive into your place. All you require is the library which is having this, and you can link up with your program here. So this program could be through a inbuilt arrangement, or you could have a soft PLC which is available in this particular brand, and you can make it to run as such. You could make, you could develop a program, transfer it into the soft PLC, then make this soft PLC to drive this arrangement as such. Certain brands, I don't want to mention it, as I was told that we shouldn't be speaking about the brands. So certain PLCs have an inbuilt soft PLC. That means there is a possibility for you to execute that program as such. It doesn't require an hardware where you have to dump that and prove it onto the real time situation as such. So you could run the program internally because there is a compiler which runs the program and delivers you, and you can also test it. Like especially in step 7 you have the possibility. There are other brands also like.
They are inbuilt software already.
No, the software has got a soft PLC. If you want, I will show later if the time is there.
What is the difference between, for example, a simulator? If you have a training simulator, which is also based upon soft PLC and blended learning, is it the same thing? Because in a training simulator also you can simulate the hardware completely.
So, a training simulator is all within the screen. Within the screen, it is on the system alone. But if you look at the blended learning, it can expand to your hardware, real-time hardware itself. So you could extend this signal into those devices itself. A simulator is within the screen, those actions are performed.
No, for example, there are power plant simulators.
Okay.
Where they build up a control desk. It's like an actual control desk. But with a program behind it, a simulation program. And you can operate it as if you are operating a real power plant which actually does not exist. But it is all simulated in the simulator itself.
Yeah. So those are all algorithms which are written over there, which can, like if you have our pneumatic situation, pneumatic or hydraulic like that, it can be extended into those places. But a power plant cannot be, you could not run a power plant with your whatever program that is there into those places as such. It is so enormous and so complex, you could always spoil something over there. So all has to be experimented, for which you require a simulator. Like it's a flight simulator. You cannot put a pilot onto the aircraft and make him to learn over there. So everything is done over here like.
Flight simulator is like blended learning.
It is not, of course, there is a lot of hardware, but in the case of where you are saying the power plant simulator or something like that, which is, everything is within the screen. It cannot be interfaced, you cannot connect it with the hardware like that. Whereas in this case of blended learning, in case of pneumatics, hydraulics and all those things, you can make the physical connections and drive it. So you can really prove it, okay, on the hardware. So you have the feel of the hands and also the cognitive skills that have been employed into the software, which is finally delivering at our hardware as such. So that is one part like that. So this is what is the soft PLC, I said, PLC sim, which again you are writing this program, sending it for this soft PLC to drive this arrangement. Again, another variations that is possible here. Of course, always you have the possibility to use the real hardware as such. So you have again your step 7 program written in some language, dumped into this PLC, then again transformed to the virtual world. So you have the hardware as well as the software getting employed in this situation as such. So earlier case I showed you the physical hardware which is of a particular brand, but now we have any generic PLC, maybe whatever is available, you could just make them. Of course, only it has to relate to this device, which is again a 24-volt signal which can be handled at this place as such. So if that is the case, then you can really make this hardware to work with the software as such. Or you could do it with some OPC server also. So you write, your programming tool is there where you program, dump it into the PLC. From the PLC through the OPC server, you are going to drive this arrangement. So many possibilities and so many technologies are getting involved in this sort of arrangements as such. So, here is one specific OPC server, so where it can relate to so many devices here. So, you could have it through a PLC, or you could have it through a specific PLC again here. This is of Siemens, this is of Codisys, and this is some software of ours. Then again you could drive it with any other PLC as such. So many options are available and you could control so many processes. So this is one of the virtual arrangements. This is what I was talking about all this time through the slides there. Then this is through one of the softwares for controlling fluids, fluid mechanics. Okay.
What is Codisys?
Codisys.
Is it related to ladder or something?
No, there are 6 languages on which you can do the program. It is developed by 3S or something, a company in Germany. So it is code independent. That means you need not have this to be connected to a specific PLC. It need not be, or it can address any PLC for that matter.
Independent platform.
Independent, code independent, that is what is the advantage here. So you could connect to a Siemens PLC, you could connect it to a Allen Bradley PLC, you could connect it to a FESTO PLC, like that. So you know that the PLCs are one part and the software is another big cost which you have to incur. So in order to do that, as per this IEC convention, they have developed or recommended for this code independent sort of softwares. So not C kind of thing, it is like the normal one. Again, I have got it in the thing, like we will see at the end if it is there. So it is just any normal thing. See, what happens is the logic is always the same in any PLC, only the front end becomes different as such, and manipulating or to understand how to use them is what is going to be time consuming for at least some time as such. So in having this, you have always one neutral platform on which you could do your programming, then you could connect it to varied sorts of PLCs as such. That is what is the thing. So you could use factory automation as well as process automation with a sort of virtual arrangements here, of course, or you could use such complex situations where you have some transportation, storage and all those things, like which are real time situations which can be done with the same speed and real time accuracies as such. The softwares are so powerful that it can replicate the actual situation in the same time frame as such. So that is the thing, like it's not some learning tool which is just there as a arrangement to learn, but it will give you the exact physical realities. That is what is the thing, like even NASA tries out this their robotic arm with this software. So of course it doesn't stop there, you just have to only learn various technologies, you have possibilities to connect them, but in a learning situation you also have to learn by experience, by creating faults. There could be situations where you could actively employ into those arrangements, like so there is also fault simulation modes that are there, where you could set up a fault, then distribute it and activate it and evaluate it at last as such. So the faults could be something like this. It could be some related to compressed air or breakdown of cables, or maybe some valves getting jammed or permanently failed, or some other problems, and which can relate to certain effects like this, and the components related to it can be identified as such. So this is the process because this is a learning tool. So naturally we need to have this to create some faults. It cannot be always doing something with your brains, but also to do some maintenance and that sort of thing, which can make the training much more reinforceable, by which the training can be really very effective as such. So for which we need to have a a fault simulating arrangement, which can also be easily accomplished with the help of this software as such. So, this is about the various possibilities using the blended learning arrangement as such. Now, I will just take you through certain things like, so you have some physical arrangements like this, say you have a rotary arm, a actuator, pneumatic actuator, which is controlled by this valves as such, and there is also a vacuum suction gripper, which is again controlled by one of these valves, and you have a start stop arrangement by which you have to make this work. You could construct this physically over there and try to do a program on the PLC and make it to run. That is one way as such, but here we are into a blended learning sort of arrangement. So, you could have the screen which is available to you, then you could make this run with the help of the previously described arrangements. Either you could connect with the interfacing device with the hardware, or you could do it with the relay based logic, or you could do with the PLC logic to control such movements which is expected in this situation as such. So, this could be a simple task which is required at the job front, let us say. So, you could easily accomplish it without having to incur on the equipment to bring in all this. Maybe we do not have a rotary actuator itself. So, how to use that is a question. You do not have how, or you do not know how to use vacuum over there. So, naturally these situations can be managed with the help of this sort of blended learning arrangements as such. So, of course, there are these IOs, each referring to which signal inputs and which output states it can reach to. So, we look at one possibility here. You have the software. So, that is a software which is going to simulate the pneumatic actuator. So, all you have to do is take those OPC components over there, then address those signals and send it into the outside world through this fluid sim out. So, this is the easy OPC component which is available. So, what happens is, when these signals are triggered through one of those means, either through a push button or through a relay control logic or through a PLC. So, this 2M1, 2M2, 3M1, 3M2 are triggered. So, in the software. So, when this trigger happens, then it is going into the outside world through fluid sim out. So, if you could collect them at the peripherals there and connect it to those 2M1, 2M2 or 3M1, 3M2 on the reality over there, whichever is there. So, you could see them working over there either in the hardware or simultaneously in the software as such. So, similarly, you could also bring outside signals from the field into the computer. So, that means you have a screen which is again designed exactly as what this controls are. You have a rotary actuator, you have two solenoid valves and all those things which are placed, and you are trying to move this. So, you would have constructed such situations as such. So, how do you run this from the field? So, what you do is the field signals you can trigger with those buttons or whatever is the thing like that is presented to the valve there and makes that thing to work. So, those same signals can be linked into the device that is connecting to the software. So, you have the signal that is addressing the solenoid valve there, the physical solenoid over there, at the same time that can be connected to the device that is addressing the software. So, what happens is both these things can work simultaneously, that is you have movements virtually displayed as well as movements happening actually. The signal strength does not get diluted. The 24 volt signal what is addressed at the solenoid valve can address there also. Parallelly, it is brought into this device which is converted into a 5 volt signal to address the PLC here, and those are recognized by the OPC components that are built in inside the software, which makes this thing also to move. So, of course, in electro-pneumatics there are varied softwares that are available to control those situations which you would have tried in your situations in your practical lab experiments as such. So, you have something like this. So, you have very complex relay based logics which are there, which can straight away run the thing. If you try to simulate it, if I click the start button, so this relay gets energized and this contact of the relay wherever it is linked to whichever solenoid, that starts to move there. So, if that solenoid is addressed to one of the cylinders there, the cylinder starts to move. So, this can be done very easily here. But you could also take this, maybe it can be in the parallel form like a PLC logic, or as I showed in vertical rows as rungs. So, in whichever way you would want to have it, you could have it. So, all you have to do is take those signals, termination is taken into those outputs. So, you have 2M1 which are the outputs set on different solenoids there. So, those are all set into this output which can be addressed to the outside field signals. Similarly, whatever field signals you are creating from the outside is connected into the software, and if those signals are coming from the field, it can also affect the virtual thing like. So, both the ways it is possible to control as such. So, this is what I was just talking about like.
These are in the software root sim connection script which you are showing for
Yeah.
IOs.
Yeah.
Those are inside the software.
Yeah, fluid sim out, fluid sim in is there. You need not try such complex things. Simply you can try one output into output and see whether it is really reflecting at the field or something. Then you can gradually try. So, if you have many licenses of that, simultaneously many people can work together like that. So, this is again the blended learning, and of course, the means to do that, like what you have to click the OPC output as such, the devices, then enable the OPC mode, then connect this program into it and check address the particular outputs into the virtual controller as such, virtual PLC, and finally link it to the fluid sim out or in. And also address, make the connections to the same thing like. So, you are addressing, let us say, this software and this is your controller. So, you are linking them here. You can switch between any of these things, like you could use a S7 internal PLC or a Codesys PLC or some other brand of PLC, and in this case use this particular software to drive this arrangement as such. And this is where this virtual controller is exchanging data from the field as well as from the virtual world. So, it is simultaneously transmitting whatever is coming from the virtual thing through those outputs here, and similarly receiving the signals from the field into these places and exchanging with the software there. So, you could choose any one of them, EB1 or AB1 or EB1, AB1 like that. So, by which you could now run a virtual arrangement without having those physical requirements. So, this is one possibility like that. So, you would have this things working in this manner. So, you will have this 1 to 1. So, that will address this thing through this OPC server as such. Similarly, that is one part, that is using a software which is having such complex inbuilt mechanisms, incorporating many technologies into that. You could also do with the virtual sort of thing, like where EasyVip, as I was telling you, is available on the net. You could still program to those arrangements like that, looking into the explanation that have been made there. So, you could make this water tank fill to a particular level for a particular temperature and all those things. Similarly, the cylinder. So, I am going little fast on these things.
This EasyVip is exactly what?
ECV is a virtual pre-configured exercises. We can call it as an exercises or physical processes which are available.
They are available for.
They are, yeah, it can be downloaded, or it comes with the easy port default. It is also, I was told it is also available on the net, or at least in our site for downloading. So, with this I think what happens is your PLC programming task becomes real time to the processes. That is what is the big advantage in using the EasyVip, rather than just looking at some imaginary situations where we are trying to drive them. You have something what is that meaningful sort of arrangements, or a task oriented approach to do that. So, that makes really the skilling much more meaningful in learning situations as such. So, like this there are about 28 tasks or something like that I was told. So, you could do that. So, that is about what is this multi-skilling or blended learning as a cost effective skilling tool as such. So, what we saw here was the possibilities of learning here. First of all, we looked at why we have to have this thing like that, what is the need for it. Then we explored into various possibilities that were available for these purposes, and we looked into a small way as to how this can really bring in such cost effective trainings solutions and more objectively targeted training possibilities reached to as such. So, with this I will just conclude my presentation, but if you still are interested, I was hearing something about what I forgot really as to what I will show at the end. If you really want it, I have in my laptop to show you.
have 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. What was that? In any specific thing like?
Sir, in this blended learning, I think you are combining software and hardware.
Hardware.
But how the training is provided, is it a centralized training so that the trainee will come to your place and he will get the experience of software along with the hardware? Or the software can be at the trainee's place and the hardware is at your place? Then the program can be run remotely.
Okay. See, blended learning, as I was telling you, there are various licensing methods which we were looking at, different licensing method. You could have a standalone arrangement, or you could have a networked sort of arrangements and all those things like. So, you could opt for any one of those things like. But if you really would like to interface with the systems, with the hardware, so naturally it is a scaled down arrangement of meeting varied technologies with the help of one particular tool as such. The tool is going to be your virtual screen, which is incorporating all those technologies in one place, and the triggering mechanisms could be through your hardware, something like that.
So hardware you have to buy.
One piece is enough for that matter. Yeah, something like that.
So kit like thing you have to buy.
One of them is enough. Or else it is not necessary to use the hardware, it can also replace that if you are content with it. Everything is running on the screen as such.
That is e-learning.
Yeah,
That's not a blended learning. That will become
that will be e-learning. That is also possible as such. But if you really would like to have it, you need to have that interfacing tool and one piece of hardware, if you look at that thing. But of course, e-learning is also a cost effective solution, because you cannot bring such a varied technology in your place. So, there are two options as we were seeing. The two possibilities are there. One is totally virtual, other time is a partially virtual sort of thing, like if you really would like to have it.
Any more questions?
What is the role of, sir, this easy port, that is hardware part?
Yeah.
Easy port.
Easy port is actually a converter sort of thing, like which does the 24-volt signal into a computer sort of 5 volts logic signal sort of thing like.
You are connected with this virtual PLC to some hardware part.
Yeah.
In between you have.
Yeah. So, that is what is happening is the signal from the computer is going to be a 5 volt signal. So, at the end your relay or whatever the thing is a 24 volts as such. So, this transforms that. Similarly, whatever is coming there as 24 volts gets addressed here as 5 volts. vice versa. Both the ways it is possible. That's what I was saying. When you are triggering a push button there, it can simultaneously move the cylinder there as well as a rotary actuator here, if you are making the connection in that way.
That is shown through fluid sim.
Fluid sim. It can also be through easy port or whatever is the thing.
That is software part, that is hardware.
Hardware part.
Means fluid sim, whatever you have done, same simulation you can see in the real world working through EasyPort. So you can connect EasyPort to your PC, and then you can run a fluid sim simulation on the screen. At the same time, you can connect hardware outside the system. Yeah, and then whatever simulation you are seeing here, cylinders moving, you can see physically they are moving there also. So basically, simulating environment you can connect with the physical world.
Can you do the same thing with automation studio also?
Yeah, it's also permitted, because if you have seen the demonstration, he has mentioned there's an IO interfaces available or through OPC server. See, everything now, because OPC server once sits in between, then you can have any simulating environment on this side and any physical environment on the other side. So it can act as an interface between. So this is EasyPort is also working through OPC only.
These LPS stations are there in automation studio also?
No. Those are in Cirrus automation.
Means after OPC server, I can connect my hardware.
Yeah. So your software can communicate with OPC server, or and other side it's a hardware. So then I can bring any. Yesterday we were discussing that UI part.
Yes.
So this is something kind of simulating environment is in a user interface actually. So then it can exchange variables with the physical hardware through OPC server. So then you can have simulating environment interacting with the real world environment. So that's the advantage of having that. No more questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.